10 years older.
Mi sono reso conto che io sono rimasto uguale e lei invece in realtà sembra che abbia 10 anni di più.
Benvenuti alla conferenza stampa di Light on My Life, evento di chiusura di Alice nella città in collaborazione con Notorious Pictures che lo distribuirà nelle sale dal 21 novembre. Do il benvenuto al regista e attore Casey Affleck e alla protagonista Pniowsky. Faccio la domanda introduttiva. Questo film nasce con una storia della buonanotte e inizia con una storia della buonanotte. Come si è collegato questo con questa possibilità di futuro distopico e quindi come è nato il film?
Oh, I see. The movie opens with the story about, with the father telling the daughter story about the animals that were not chosen to go on Noah's Ark. And as I understand the question is, how is that connected to the rest of the film? Well, it wasn't intentional. That was the first thing that I wrote for the movie. It was just a story that I told to my own kids, and I liked it. I liked what it said about society's preferences and so many things. And then as the script evolved, it became that story became a little bit more thematically connected to the rest of the movie. Just because this is a story about humanity sort of threatened with extinction.
Did you become Rag?
Sorry?
How did you become Rag?
Okay, I cut my hair. That was a big part of it. I don't know, I kind of just put a little bit of myself into Rag, you know, as you do with every character that you play. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. It wasn't like a super complicated process.
Vado senza microfono?
Vai.
Vado. Sì, per Affleck la domanda è: che mondo sarebbe senza donne? Un mondo dove sono tutti in guerra contro tutti.
What type of world would it be without women? A world where everybody is at war and engaged at war with anybody.
E poi una seconda domanda.
And then a second question, if
So che hai iniziato a pensare a questo film prima di diventare padre. Come è cambiata la storia nel momento in cui veramente aveva un rapporto con le figlie?
When you had your own children, so you had a relationship to them.
Well, the first question, I guess the answer is it would be obviously a very terrible place. That was the point of it. I wanted to choose a science fiction premise that made the world sort of on the brink of disaster in the worst possible way. And I wanted to make it not just arbitrary, but I wanted to have this particular brand of apocalypse be somehow connected to the story that was happening between the characters. So if it's a story about families and then you have a bunch of zombies, well, that's fun, but it's not really connected to what's happening with the family. In this story, you have a father who's trying to raise a child, and to me, having very, very small children at the time, you know, you tend to think of the world as being this kind of dangerous place for your kid, and sometimes, and you want to protect them from all the dangers in the world, and from the things that you cannot protect them, you hope to prepare them to protect themselves. And so I designed this disease to be something that was especially awful for a young woman, and so that the father would be feel even more threatened by it. I'm trying to speak slowly so you can write, but I guess I don't know. No, yeah,
She's a monster. Can you let me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Ma per quello che risponde...
Okay, I'll make them shorter.
No, you don't need to.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming. Oh, the second question. The second question, actually, I started to write this story when I had kids, not before I had kids. So, as I said, that the first thing that I wrote down was the story at the beginning of the movie. And that was just a story that I told to my kid and my niece and nephew, and it did evolve. It took me a long time to write it, and so I started writing when I had a 4-year-old, and then I ended writing when I had a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old. So some of the scenes, sometimes I see in the movie, some of the scenes in which the dad is talking to his daughter, it sounds a little bit like he's talking to a small child, and sometimes it sounds like he's talking to an older child. But that's sort of okay, because the age that Anna was in the movie, she's on the cusp of being a small child and being a more grown-up person. So it kind of works.
Volevo chiedere, e in parte mi ha già risposto Affleck, nel senso questa ambientazione distopica del film, no? È stato un po', diciamo, un pretesto per trattare più approfonditamente temi come quelli del rapporto tra padre e figlia, che è già abbastanza difficile, diciamo, normalmente, figuriamoci in una situazione del genere, ma anche per trattare il tema femminile della donna, no? Mi riferisco alla favola iniziale, che poi viene cambiata verso la fine del film dal personaggio di Anna, che fa capire che in effetti è la donna, è la volpe femmina, no? Che ha fatto, diciamo, che ha risolto la situazione. E poi invece volevo chiedere ad Anna come è andato questo esordio cinematografico, insomma direttamente con un ruolo molto forte, molto importante da protagonista, e se ovviamente ha nel suo futuro altro cinema.
Are you planning to act in more movies in the future?
Okay. Okay, so there were multiple questions in that.
Più domande in una.
I think, I don't know how to say this. I mean, I'm beyond grateful and thankful to have gotten the role that I got, and I think it was probably the best experience of my life. And it was especially great to like start off my, I don't want to say career, but you know, career as an actor. And I think that this role is kind of, it's definitely what got me started. And yes, I do want to act in the future. That's what I want to be, because I just love to act. It's my passion. And I know that's cheesy, but it's just true.
Yes, and I'll just say to that you know, Anna sent in a tape of herself auditioning for the part, and I had seen hundreds of young people, and she immediately stood out as being someone who was very kind of self-possessed. She had a sort of a quality that's almost impossible, I think, to teach, which is that you sort of wonder what she's thinking when she's on camera. She seemed to have thoughts going on inside. She's not just sort of saying lines, and I thought she was struck a perfect balance between being sort of vulnerable and being independent, and she was able to do both, take direction and do one or the other. And I think that, you know, when you put young people in movies, very often they'll have a role and they go to school and then they do other stuff, and or else they just have a certain appeal as a kid that sort of fades. And I think that Anna has the qualities that will sustain her for a long career, because she was able to do all of the dialogue in different ways, and to take direction very, very well. And so I think she will have a very long, successful career. You want to say that?
Please, thanks.
The question was about.
La seconda domanda
Se
era?
l'atmosfera distopica
Sì,
è un po'
okay.
un pretesto
It's a
per
kind of
parlare
pretext
dei
to
temi
talk
di cui abbiamo
about
parlato,
Right.
la donna.
Okay, I think that the suspense in the movie comes not from the very dire threats that face this parent and child, but in fact the suspense comes really from the inevitable loss of innocence that is looming at the end of the movie. And we see it begin at the start of the movie when she begins to they're existing in this little bubble of a tent and this little bubble of a relationship, and the daughter begins to sort of poke out of it. And we know that it's a dangerous place out in the world, but we also know that all young people eventually leave the little tent of their family and they go out into the world.
Io volevo sapere nel passaggio tra il esordio Unstill che è completamente diverso a Life of My Life. Volevo sapere la voglia di esorcizzare le paure di un padre che peraltro
La voglia di esorcizzare,
le
scusa?
paure
The
paterne
wish and desire to exercise the feelings of the father
è stata l'unica molla o c'è stato
by this
qualche
movie.
altro
Was this the only trigger to
elemento
which
che l'ha
led you to
spinto a
make this
raccontare
movie?
questa
Or
storia?
was there any other element
E
which
poi
drove
volevo
you, pushed you
sapere
to tell the
qualcosa
story?
sull'eventuale rapporto con la strada di Cormac McCarthy, che mi sembra che sia un percorso parallelo che però lei ha evitato in maniera incogliabile di plagiare in alcun modo.
Managed absolutely to avoid kind of conflict.
Thank you. The questions, I understand it was there, other than telling the story of a parent and a child, was there something else that compelled me to make the movie?
Yeah.
Okay.
But other than the fears of a father towards his kids.
Right. Well, I did a movie once called Jerry about two people walking in the desert, and almost nothing happens until they're lost, and one of them gives up hope, and he asks the other one to kill him. This is going to be a long story. Do you want to just go through it as your time?
Ho fatto una volta un film che si chiamava
And while we were making the movie, the film director was Gus Van Sant, and we were living in the middle of nowhere in Argentina while we were shooting, and so we'd shoot, and then every night we'd come home and we would sort of sit around the fire. It was very cold, and we'd say, and I would say, "What is this movie about?" He said, "Let's let the themes find themselves," which is something does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's something that was frustrating at the time, because I wanted to know, well, if we know what the movie's about, then we can sort of engineer it backwards so that we figure out what should happen to the characters. Should one kill the other? Should the other kill the other one? Should he kill himself? Should neither one die? Should they be found? And he said, why don't we just tell the story that we set out to tell, see what occurs to us along the way, and then the film, when it's finished, will tell us what it was about. I was planning on making a different movie, and as I started, I was doing this just because I was writing down things that I was thinking about and imagining that came out of my own life and my relationship with my kids. And once I had a whole script, or once I had a lot of scenes, I started to wonder, what is this movie about? And then I remembered what Gus Van Sant told me on that movie Jerry, and I thought that would be the right attitude to have for this script, to sort of write down things that, from conversations from my own life, things that I remembered saying to my kids, or my kids saying to me, things I wish that I hadn't said to my kids, or that my kids hadn't said to me, and put it all together and see and let the film sort of tell me what it was about. Making this movie, I started to realize that it was about sort of learning to let go, I guess, in a way that I hadn't realized when I was writing it. And then that becomes a little bit more obvious when he puts in the scene, where I put in the scene where I drop her out the window and she tells me to let go. It was also about things like, the movie was also about stuff, sort of about violence. It was about guns. It was about, there are other little things that were important to me that the movie was about, that aren't so obvious in the movie.
Una curiosità da chiedere ad Anna. Visto che questo film è l'evento chiusura dell'Alice nella città che ha come pubblico i giovani adulti, una categoria dove, che lei sta vivendo in questo momento. Quali sono gli elementi del percorso di Reg con cui lei si è connessa di più, si è sintonizzata di più, e che cosa ha imparato?
As Reg or as myself?
As yourself, but in relation to Rag.
Got it. Okay. Let me think about it. Okay. So, as Casey said, a lot of a big message in the movie is about letting go, and I think that sometimes, for example, like I may be putting too much pressure on myself or other people, things like that, or just little things that maybe don't really matter, and I just have to let those things go. Or sometimes, change happens and change is hard, but I have to let that go, let the past go, That's a big thing that I learned from this film. I also learned a lot about family, I think, because it made me realize how important my family is and how important just it is to have everyone around you and to have people around you that love you. And it also showed me how much your family loves you, because Casey's character, Dad, he loves Reg so much that he just, that's kind of all his life is, light of my life. So I think that it just really shows you how much family is important, things like that.
Allora, innanzitutto ti ringrazio per questo film.
Thank you for this.
E la mia domanda riguarda un po' il genere, sanatorio che è un certo tipo di fantascienza legata a un futuro post-apocalittico sia un pezzo molto importante della storia del cinema americano. Io guardando il tuo film, per esempio, ho sentito molto vicino Blindness, l'adattamento cinematografico del romanzo di Saramago, ma anche opere molto più distanti nel tempo come L'ultimo uomo sulla terra, il film del 64 con Will Child, però magari sono impressioni mie da scrittrice che amo molto di film. Vorrei sapere nella tua vita di spettatore e di autore se ci sono delle opere di fantascienza
Life, sorry, is a life as a viewer or a writer, whether there are some sci-fi works or movies or books which inspired you.
Yes, I'm not totally sure I understood, except for the last part, which was what are the science fiction works that inspire me, and the similarities.
This seems to be sci-fi, dystopic future. Seems to be kind of a very important piece of American cinema.
I see.
And she made some connections with
Yes.
the movies she had seen. She liked the movie very much, and she wanted to know whether there are some sci-fi works or books or movies which were your source of inspiration.
Definitely. I love those movies, and I have since I was a little kid. Movies like Road Warrior, or even things like I Am Legend or World War Z, kind of big movies that imagine a future where humanity is either sort of extinct or on its way. A future where you sort of wipe away all of the kind of clutter of society. And then you get to see kind of what's left with people. How do people behave, and what do they do when you get rid of everything that they've built? And it sort of says something about the essence of people. Do you want to say that?
Yeah.
I don't know why there's a trend right now in America to make these kinds of movies, except I could say that maybe there's a sort of underlying sort of tension and sense of impending doom in our country at the moment, for good reason, and but also, I made this movie back in 2015, so maybe they're all just copying us. And I wanted to say, I forgot to mention the Cormac McCarthy thing about the road. That was Cormac is definitely one of my favorite writers, and when I was much
younger, I was doing a movie with a woman named Lisa Kruger, and I was shooting in El Paso where he lived. This was before he was as well known as he is. This is like 25 years ago.
And I sent him a letter when people still wrote letters and sent them. And I invited him to come to the film set. And I'm looking at your page as if you're getting it right, and I have no idea what you're writing anyway. And I was shooting out in the desert on this film set in El Paso, and I was doing a scene where I was standing way alone with Heather Graham, and I saw a guy two people come walking towards us from all the way from camera, and I thought, oh, they're come to tell us that we've done something wrong or we need to do it again. And this guy came out, it was Cormac McCarthy and his wife, and he had come to visit the set, and he didn't know us, and he stood there, and I have no idea why he showed up. I wrote him a letter, and he just came, and he sat and had lunch with us, and he talked about a new book that he was thinking of writing that was about the dystopian future, sort of, and it turned out to be The Road. And so that book was definitely something that, I loved and meant a lot to me, and it was something that I had to sort of avoid as I was doing this. But there are so many things, when you try to write something or make a movie, there's so many things to avoid if you want to be original, because there's really nothing that is completely original. You're always going to find someone else that's done something similar. And so I found that the best thing that I could do was just to sort of write what I was interested in, what was in my kind of heart that I cared about, and it certainly had similarities to lots of things. For example, it had the movie Witness was something that I thought a lot about when I was writing it. The relationship between Harrison Ford and the kid, and the way that they treat violence in society, and sort of the arc of the character. Also, the Belgian filmmaker Chantal Akerman, the way stylistically, the way that that movie was made. I'm looking at what my notes say. So there are a lot of things that I drew inspiration from, both science fiction and non-science fiction, and I am grateful for all of them.